You literally live in here, dude.
Is that a problem?
You should take a break. Be bored every so often.
I don't ever want to be bored.
Why not?
There's always something to do.
I think that's probably an issue you should address.
I think you have a lot of issues. Stop with the throwing.
Dude!
My high school diploma?
There's just something about any type of steamed dumpling or bun that I can't get enough of. And this Taiwanese style of Gua Bao is especially fluffy and pillowy and has an amazing pork filling. I've wanted to make something like this for a while, so this is how I do it. Starting with the pork filling, I have these frozen strips of pork belly that I've used for Korean recipes. They come already in this size from my Korean market, but you can slice your own if you want. I have about a pound and I'm slicing them into sizable bite-sized pieces. I'm gonna fit like 1 to 2 on each bun when all is said and done. And just be careful, my pork belly has these bony or cartilagey pieces that I cut around and discard, yours may or may not. But then I'm going to sear these before I braise them for a bit, starting with a little bit of bacon fat. You could use oil. I had to do this in 2 batches over medium-high heat, and I'm just giving them like a minute per side. Just looking for some Maillard reaction. This is not going to cook them through, that's what the braise is for, but you don't want to miss out on this flavor. When both my batches are done, I'm going to add all the meat back to the pot, and then we're going to deglaze. I'm adding a couple tablespoons each of regular soy sauce and dark soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of shaoxing wine, and 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Then some aromatics. I have 1 star anise and 1 cinnamon stick. Then for spice, 3 chiles de arbol, but they're really spicy, so if you're using Sichuan chilies instead, then use like 6 of them. Then I'm adding a half teaspoon of white pepper and then a few cloves of garlic, which I've crushed and left in the paper. Also about an inch of ginger that I've sliced really thinly. Don't worry about peeling it. Then I have 2 scallions that I've tied in a knot just to make it fit better. And lastly, I'm adding about 2 cups of water just to cover everything so it can braise. Make sure to scrape off any fond on the bottom, and once it comes to a boil, you can lower to a simmer and cover until the pork is tender. I let mine go for about an hour and a half, but anywhere from 1 to 2 hours is probably okay. And while that's going, we can prep the dough for our actual bao. I'm not an expert at this, but I tried my best here and they came out okay. I first have 100 grams or a little less than half a cup of warm water that I'm adding 1 packet or about 7 grams of active dry yeast to. Then I'm adding 15 grams or a tablespoon and a half of sugar and mixing that together until it becomes a
frothy boy.
Meanwhile, I'll mix the dry ingredients starting with 200 grams or 1 2/3 cup of flour, 6 grams or a teaspoon of kosher salt, and then a 1/4 teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda. I'm mixing that by hand a little bit with the dough hook before I add in the frothy boy. Lastly, just 50 grams or 3 to 4 tablespoons of neutral oil. I'm going to mix that on low until it becomes cohesive, and then I'm going to mix it on high until it's kneaded. It usually takes 8 to 10 minutes, and you know it's done when it's stretchy enough to see light through without it tearing. This was not done enough to my liking, so I mixed it a few more minutes until it got to this. Now I'm going to wrap that up and cover and let rise for about an hour. Then we can come back and start to form it into our 8 bao. The actual proper way to do this is to just roll this out into an even sheet and use a cutter to make 3-inch circles. I didn't have a 3-inch cutter and I don't really like working with scrap dough afterwards. So I'm cutting this into 8 even pieces using my kitchen scale and forming them individually. It's going to make them a little uneven and not circular, but that's okay. I'm just trying to press each one into about a 1/4 inch thick and about 3 inches in diameter. A rolling pin helps, but I also use my palm to try to even it out. And you'll notice I'm putting each of these onto a little square of parchment paper. I cut those out into about 4-inch sections, which is really important so that the bao doesn't stick to the steamer. But once I'm done, I'm going to get these onto a tray and cover them and let them rise for another 45 minutes to an hour. But then I'll actually realize you're supposed to fold them over and let them rise in their final form. So I'm taking a little ramekin of oil and brushing it onto 1/2 of each of the bao. Carefully fold each one over and the oil is going to help it not to stick, or at least kind of. It's just going to make this kind of fold over taco shape that's going to puff up, and this is what they're signature for. And now I'll cover them and let them rise for another 45 minutes to an hour. And the other main element we need to make is this pickled shallot. It's very simple. I just bought a little container of 3 shallots and I'm slicing them very thinly. I stick those in a mason jar and I get my liquids boiling. It's supposed to be equal parts of rice vinegar and water, like a 1/2 cup each. Then I'm adding a small handful of Sichuan peppercorns. This is a really signature flavor that you need in this recipe. I'm adding a few whole coriander seeds as well because I like that flavor in pickles. Then about a tablespoon of sugar and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And once that's boiling, you can dump that over the shallots and let them sit. I made these right before this recipe and it was still good, but you can make them days in advance and it would be even better. Okay, we can check on our pork, and you can see it's very tender and fall apart at this point, which is exactly what we want. You can remove that and drain the liquid, and we can steam our bao at this point. I'm starting with my wok with just a couple of inches of water that I'm bringing to a quick simmer. You can drop the heat and add your steamer. I have this double-decker bamboo steamer that I've used in my xiaolong bao video. It's linked below, and it'll allow me to steam all my bao at once, but if you don't have this, then just do it in batches. Just carefully lay each one with a little bit of space around it, making sure not to touch the sides as well. Cover that in steam for about 12 minutes, and you should have these puffy bao once you're done. Some of mine kind of stuck to themselves a bit. I don't know if I didn't add enough oil, or I probably just didn't do something right, but it's okay. To assemble, unfold your bao and add 1 to 2 pieces of your tender pork, a healthy amount of those pickled shallots. This might be the best part. Then I have some julienne carrots that I chopped up, as well as a few sprigs of cilantro. Lastly, just squirt on a little bit of hoisin sauce and finish with some chopped peanuts. This is super colorful, really appealing looking, and it's going to pack a flavor punch. You can serve this as an appetizer, or it can be its own meal, whatever you want. There's a reason this is super popular across the world. Now let's get to the taste test.
So this is proof that things don't have to be perfect to be amazing. They probably do have to be perfect for the YouTube algorithm though. Oh well. I just know that this will be a ton of flavors packed into very small bites. Let's dive right in. Cheers. I mean, that's pretty spot on. I will say I'm not usually the hugest fan of this doughy texture of the bao around the meat, but in this dish, it just works perfectly. It's just something that you crave. I don't know, I like it. The pork belly is definitely the star of the show. It's super tender, it just falls apart when you eat it. All of those flavors that braised into it are very evident here. You can definitely taste the star anise and the cinnamon. And I love the pickled shallots. Like everyone says, that acidity cuts through everything else. But yeah, I've been wanting to make something like this for quite a long time, and I'm glad I finally did it. I don't know if I'd always be in the mood to make the bao dough from scratch myself, but I think this is something you can find in stores that you can just steam at home. But if anything, this is definitely a good way to get rid of pork belly or any meat in your freezer. But that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. I think I'm just gonna eat the other 7 of those right now.